Passover, we mark the Jews' exodus from Egypt, which is more than just physical. We left the land of materialism and embarked on a spiritual journey to the land of Israel. Today, many people see Jews focusing back on the material world and adopting foreign culture over their own. True or false, and to what extent? Rabbi Yoni Kamen, Program Director of Eshat Torah in Tel Aviv, and Tova Birnbaum of the Bina Center for Jewish Identity and Hebrew Culture join us now to discuss this controversial issue. Thank you for joining us. Currently, though, now in Israel, we have, the Jews, and not just in Israel, all over the world, the Jews there's tension between sects of Judaism. They seem to be going in two opposite directions. How do you feel about this, Tova?
So when we look at the Jews, we don't look at them as a separate population, separate nation that needs to, think only separately about what's going on with the Jews here and the Jews there. We look at the picture in a bigger perspective. We look at what happens, for example, in the state of Israel. We don't have only Jews here. And we think that when we talk about Judaism and where Judaism is facing, we need to think of other issues but the Jewish nation, because the Jewish nation in Israel, and not only in Israel, has to face issues that don't only have to do with Judaism and Jews. For example, people who came here to Israel to work, people who came here because their partner is Jewish, etc., etc.
Yoni, what is your opinion on this?
Because I think that the reason why there are so many different struggles or different opinions among Jews, and going back a long time, Jews have been noted to quarrel and to fight and to argue. We're very argumentative, and I think the reason is because we have this desire for truth. We have this ability to kind of hone in on the truth, and truth is a little bit convoluted sometimes, because when you approach the truth, the truth is something that is objectively, it's there with or without you. But when you kind of bring it into yourself, when you look at it yourself, this is what's meant that there are 70 faces to the truth, or to the Torah. Okay, what that means is that I can approach the truth in many different ways, but the truth is still the truth. And Jews are very in line and fine-tuned to this idea of truth. Right. So I think that the reason why we argue and the reason why we create all different factions is because really everybody's trying to say, like, we all want the same thing. We just don't necessarily know how to agree on the approach, or how to agree on understanding the other person's approach. So I think we have to, kind of step out of ourselves, hear the other side, and weed out the untruths and get to the point of the truth. And my rabbi always told me an amazing trick whenever you're in an argument. He said what you have to do when you're in an argument is you have to try and put yourself in the other person's shoes. He says you have to switch roles for a minute. He says you should argue his side and he should argue your side. Okay, when you each know what the other person's side is, then you'll know where he's coming from. I think that's something that we could all work on.
Definitely, together. And our last question, Tova, do you think that the Jews should be conforming to society? Should we be integrating in with everyone else, be like everyone else?
As I said before, I do think that Jewish culture is something that needs to be preserved. It is something that needs to be deeply learned. I do think that it can help us find ourselves in many ways, and it can help us create spiritual, modern life, and help us make tikkun olam. So the Jewish culture itself is a treasure that unfortunately we find it sometimes underestimated and sometimes mocked in many ways, and I disagree totally. But still, I do think that we need to be very, very careful when we talk about culture, fine. When you talk about nation, when you talk about a group of people trying to figure out what their future is, we need to be very, very careful.
And Yoni, closing words from you.
Let me address culture for a moment, okay? Because Tova just addressed culture. Culture, I think, it's an expression of values combined with a certain expression of self, okay? What that means is that the Jewish people, right, when we talk about our culture, we don't talk about like different ancient traditions that are just things that are passed down to us that everyone kind of did before us, So we continue to do, we put a certain number of feathers in our hair, or certain face paints on our face. Every single step of the way in Judaism has significance. Even our culture, especially our culture. Our culture is an amazing thing. Take, for example, just one example that came to mind just right now, gefilte fish, okay? Because you brought up Hungary. And
soon there's Leila Seder, so
soon there's
we need to get ready.
Gefilte fish. Where did this gefilte fish come from? It's a very cultural thing. People identify gefilte fish as Jewish somehow. Okay, where does it really come from? So there was a custom in Europe, and on Shabbat you're not supposed to separate. There's an idea of borer. It's a malacha on Shabbat that you're not supposed to separate, to take the bones out of the fish. You're supposed to do it the other way around, but it gets a little bit complicated. So what they do, they made a pitaron, they made an answer, and the answer was to make gefilte fish, no bones, right? This became a cultural thing, but we forget very often the values that are represented behind our cultural statements or our cultural involvements. So I think the Jewish people are extremely unique in that when we were born as a nation, we weren't born as a nation on a specific land. We weren't born as a nation on, with a specific nationality, with a flag in mind. That's not the way we were. We were born as a nation separated from, another nation, and we were born in the desert specifically, not because God didn't have a land that He wanted to take us to. He definitely did, and our ancestors before us lived in that land. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they all lived in that land, right? But nonetheless, the land was less significant than the values around which the people were going to be created. Okay, and that's what the culture really is. I do not think that we as a people should conform to other cultures because of this point that I just brought up, because of the fact that the values that we have are really that spawns this culture of ours. I think the opposite is true. I think that our culture should be, if it's really based on the values that we preach, that we would like to live, the ideal state of living, I think they should be impacting and influencing the rest of the nations, as opposed to us going their way. They should be coming closer our way, and I think we've done this over the last, the course of the last couple thousand years. We really have influenced positively with our values, with our teachings, with our morality, and so on.
Tova wants to say something.
I do. I must say that I a little bit disagree with the way you defined culture. I want to tell you guys that we in Bina, we have a secular yeshiva. We have young people, young adults from the ages of 18 to 30. Most of them are secular, they don't observe halakha, but they do want, deeply want to know, as deep as they can, to know about their culture. And we learn Torah and Gemara and Hebrew literature and art. We learn that as a culture, not as you said, as a gefilte fish or a chanukiah that the kids make in the kindergarten. That's not culture. Culture is everything you said, which is of course values, but it's everything that we as a nation created. It's not only texts, it's other things, but we believe that it has a meaning to our daily life in the state of Israel and the Jewish nation bichlal. So
absolutely, I'm not arguing on that point. What I was just saying was that cultures have to be rooted in values, and we have to live according to those values, as opposed to, kind of fool ourselves into thinking that these cultural things will make us Jewish without actually the foundations of what they're built on.